What if I accomplished would make this the best year ever? What if I accomplished over the next 4 months would change the entire trajectory of my career or my life? Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome to this week's edition of Life of a CISO with yours truly, Dr. E is in the house. Hope you are doing awesome. Hope you're enjoying the transition from summer into fall, right? We're heading into September, right? 4 months left in the year, and I know you are crushing it. But as always, it's never too late to reset. It's never too late to go in and say, okay, what do I want to accomplish for the rest of this year? The way that I like to do it is a little different. With 4 months left, what if I accomplished would make this the best year ever? What if I accomplished over the next 4 months would change the entire trajectory of my career or my life? It's just a different shift because often we go in and we want to set these goals. And the reality is, when you set goals or resolutions or whatever you want to call them, and you don't accomplish them, it's for one simple reason. They weren't that important to you. Because if they were that important to you, if they were that critical, if they became non-negotiables and you went all in, ride or die, trust me, you would have got them done and you would have exceeded them. So the problem isn't with goal setting or resolution. That's what everyone says the problem is. No, the problem has nothing to do with it. The problem is you're not getting passionate enough about who you need to become. Everyone focuses on the what or the why. The reality is, yes, you might like a nicer car, but is it really that important to you? Is it really that important that you're going to change your entire life, your structure, your lifestyle? Are you willing to give up golf and work a part-time job in order to get that? Probably not, right? So not that important to you. But when you go in and it's life-changing, where you make it, you're becoming a different person. You are changing the trajectory of your life, the trajectory of your career on who you are going to become. You are making changes that go beyond driving a car that's 10K more than what you're currently driving, right? It is changing the trajectory of your life. There's a different energy. There's a different focus. There's a different excitement. So if you're one of those folks that struggle or have a little difficulty in that area of targets, try getting more energy and more passion around it. But what I want to do is get you more passionate about being a world-class Chief Information Security Officer. I don't want you to be average. I don't want you to be good. Now, here's the problem. The problem today is there's such a demand for Chief Information Security Officers. This is one of those sort of overnight regulations, SEC, European regulations, and others, all of a sudden overnight started saying, you must have a CISO. You must have a Chief Information Security Officer. So all of a sudden, companies either started anointing people within, taking one of their best technical people, and saying, you are now Chief Information Security Officer. Boom, go forth and conquer. And the problem is, they're a security engineer, and they're going to act like a security engineer, and they're going to behave like a security engineer, and they're not going to be a CISO. But the problem with the regulations and the compliance and a lot of the different laws out there is all they say is you must have a CISO. You, on your org chart, must have somebody that has those 4 letters next to their name. They don't define what the job is, who it is, how it works, or anything else. So in many of these companies, they have somebody with the title, but nobody playing the role. And companies are starting to realize that's hurting them. Because if there's nobody who's really a chief officer, who's focused on a business standpoint, making sure cybersecurity is implemented correctly, in this current day and age, with all the threats and all the targets and everything going out there, it's going to hurt the organization. So then you have these companies that now are saying, okay, randomly taking a security engineer who's super good at techie and trying to make them a strategic chief officer doesn't work. So now they're looking for a real chief information security officer. The problem is, because it's such a new area, there's very few people with experience in that. So those with experience are very valuable, and those that are really good are compensated extremely well in that area. But now you have all these companies that need a chief information security officer, so they're going to have to bring somebody in as what we call a first timer. They currently aren't a CISO, but they might be a deputy, they might be a information security officer, they might be a manager, and they're going in and giving them that chance because there's so many opportunities out there, which means it's very easy to get a job being average. So unfortunately, a lot of people are like, okay, let's just do the minimum, do the basics, and become a good chief information security officer, and you will have a good job and a good salary. I don't want that for you. I look at you, I'm looking in your eyes. I'm looking in your eyes. I see greatness. I want you to be world class. I want you to be the one who writes the books. I want you to be the one who's giving the keynotes. I want you to be the thought leader. I want you to be the one that when somebody at a Fortune 10 company, when the CEO of a Fortune 10 company starts saying, we need the best chief information security officer out there, everybody they talk to says your name. You have to hire X. That's what I want for you. That's my vision for you. Now, you can do one of two things. You can accept the baton. I'm handing that baton to you. You can accept the baton and you can become that version. Or you could sit there and go, I don't know if I want that. Come on, Eric, you don't know me. I'm not sure if I want to put in that energy and effort, and you can drop the baton. But that choice is yours. I will give you everything you need. I will set you up. I will encourage you. I will support you. And here's the problem. And I'm not just saying this, it's not superficial. I truly believe that's true for you. We might not have met in person, but trust me, there's a reason you're listening to this podcast. There's a reason you found this podcast. There's a reason you are continuing listening now, even after everything I said for the first 8 minutes. So trust me, if you are still listening, there is something special about you. There is something unique about you. You have everything it needs to be that world-class CISO that everybody wants on their stages, that everybody wants at their company. But here's the simple truth. I can believe in you and I can support you, but if you don't believe you're world class and you're not going to show up as world class, that's all that matters. My beliefs don't matter, so you need to get the conviction. You need to go deep and realize how great you really are, and you need to own it. You need to own that greatness, because until you own it, and it's not from an arrogance, it's not from a cocky, it's from you truly are the best. You are truly a world-class CISO. So what I'd like to cover today is sort of what I call the CISO checklist. Because the questions I get the most, whether I'm doing individual coaching with my high-end clients, whether I'm doing group coaching, whether I'm on stage, whether I'm on a panel, whether I'm in a group, whether I meet somebody at an airport. All the questions that I usually get revolve around this. Eric, how do I turn a company around if they weren't really security centric? Or Eric, I know I really was not stepping up over the last year, and I had the title, but I wasn't really a CISO. What do I need to do to step into that role? Or Eric, I'm a brand new CISO. What do I do in the first 90 days? And all those types of questions are basically around how do we systemize the role of a CISO? What are the core steps, components, or pieces that need to be in place in order for an organization to truly step up and own and implement security the way they're supposed to? So first and foremost, the first item you must have in place is a buy-in and conviction from the executive team on what the risk posture for the organization is. Now, this is the core group. Your CEO, COO, CFO, maybe a chief legal officer, and a company. It's maybe 4 or 5 people, but you need to sit with them and say, okay, we all know, or maybe you don't and you need to educate, but 100% security doesn't exist. The only way we could have 100% security is zero functionality, which means if we have a functional business that's making money, there's going to be risks. So we need to figure out right here, right now, what is our risk tolerance? What risks are we willing to accept? And what risk are we not willing to accept? Because this is the fundamental problem where companies struggle. If there's not an agreement on what is acceptable level of risk, then basically it's the Wild West and all risk is allowed. Because if there's not a risk tolerance, here's the problem. If there's not a list that says, okay, here's the line. Below the line, okay, we don't need to know about it. We're giving you authority, Mr. or Mrs. CISO, that any risk below this line, you will work out with the business owner. It's acceptable. They will manage it. They will control it. And we're good. And we don't need to hear about it. But any risks above the line that you inform the business owner is not acceptable, and they decide to do it anyway, they decide not to listen to you and do it anyway, then those need to be brought to us. And we need to be made aware of them. And we need to go in and decide whether that was a correct or not a correct decision. And now it's only 3, 4, 5 of these. So because it's a small number, they actually can manage and process them correctly. But here's the issue. If there's no risk posture, if there's no risk tolerance, if there's no line that says what is or is not acceptable risk, then every risk has to be brought to them. Hundreds of risks get brought to them. It's too much, it's overwhelming, it's outside their pay grade. They should not be deciding on small little risk, and they end up ignoring it. And then every risk becomes acceptable. And that's these companies that you sit back and say, how did that happen? Did you ever look at some of these big breaches where billion-dollar companies that have hundreds of people working in security and they spend millions upon millions upon millions a year, and they do what appears to be a very silly item that is a risk that should have never, ever, ever been allowed or tolerated, and you sit there and go, how did that happen? And I just told you. It happened because there was no risk posture. There was no risk tolerance. And then if there's no risk tolerance or risk posture, then all risk is allowed and all risk becomes acceptable. So that's the first thing that has to be done on a CISO checklist. You have to get that agreement. Then it needs to be socialized with the board, and then it needs to be socialized with all the executives across the business. Going in and saying, hey, just so everyone's aware, this is the current risk posture or risk tolerance that our organization allows. Security is going to work with you. If it's below this, you can accept or manage it. We'll make you aware, but we're good. But if you go above it and you decide not to listen to us, then it's going to be brought to the executives. We're not telling on you. We're not going behind your back. We're just letting you know the current stance we're taking in this organization. This is how we're approaching risk. So I sort of implied it there, but the second step is to actually have a risk management and approval process in place that your executives are a part of. This is the other big problem. Most companies, the way they run it today, and the reason why you see these horrific breaches is because it's simple. Business executives have all the authority, but the CISO has all the responsibility. So, and there's no risk posture, there's no risk tolerance. So essentially, these business owners go in and say, we're going to do this crazy, crazy thing. And the CISO's like, no, too risky, unacceptable, not going to do it. And they go, tough. You don't control us. I don't report to you. I report to the CEO. And you can go ahead and tell them, because once again, no risk tolerance, so there's hundreds of risk, so it just becomes noise and they ignore all of them. And guess what happens? They do it because there's financial driven against it. There's a financial revenue number, so they do it. A major breach happens. What happens? We see it all the time. They fire the CISO. They basically say, oh, the CISO didn't do their job. They didn't implement effective security. And the reality is there's no risk management or escalation program in place, and the system is completely broken. So first thing world-class CISOs do is they have a risk posture the executives agree with. Second thing they do is they socialize and build out the risk management and escalation program across the entire company. And they do training against it. The training is simple. Right now, the way most executives think is this. They ask one question. What is the value or benefit we get from doing this? And if there's any financial benefit to doing it, they do it. Here's the problem. They completely ignore the risk. So all you want to do is train them, very simple, to ask additional questions. So what every executive should be trained on is what is the value or benefit of doing this? What is the risk or exposure? Then, is the value or benefit worth the risk or exposure? That's all security is. That's the simplest, easiest way of doing security. We make it so complicated. We add so many layers. We confuse the matter, but it's really that simple. Cybersecurity is not yes or no. Cybersecurity is about risk management. That's why the first several items in the CISO checklist are all about getting your risk house in order. It's really simple. What is value and benefit? What is the risk and exposure? And is the value or benefit worth the risk or exposure? It's really that simple. And if you can get your executives all trained on thinking that way, all of a sudden your life becomes a whole lot easier. Next on the CISO checklist, a prioritized list of business assets. You must have a list of all your business assets. You can call them business processes tied to business assets. But you must have a list of all the business processes, all of the assets in your organization that are mapped to those business processes, and you must have them prioritized. This is the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. This is the other huge problem. Companies are spending millions upon millions, in some cases hundreds of millions, on security. They have 300 people doing it, but they're fixing the wrong problem. They're not focused in on the right area because there's no prioritized list. Once again, you sit there and go, how can a system that has 500 million records of all a company's customers, PII+++, be connected to the internet, not patched, not updated, simple passwords? I mean, and you're going, how in the world could that possibly have occurred? And it's simple. There was no prioritized list. So they're just doing a lot of random things that are good, but they're not doing the right things that really matter to the organization. So we need to flip that. We need to go in and have a prioritized list. Now, once again, you'll notice my CISO checklist, a lot of this involves the core executives because security has to start at the top. This is where security is broken. It's not a technical problem. Cybersecurity is not a technical problem. IT is a technical problem. IT is much simpler. IT, you don't have to do all this. You don't have to do postures, prioritize those, or anything else. It's quite simple. You go in, you look at redundancy, you make sure there's enough redundancy, and if there's not enough redundancy and failover, you buy more technology. It is a pure play technical problem. Where the system breaks is when people think cybersecurity is a technical problem. And we just buy more stuff and it fixes the issue. It doesn't. It is a business problem. It is a strategic problem, and it requires us understanding the business, knowing the business, and getting the executives in the business involved. So they have to help create that prioritized list. And it's really easy. Here's why. If you go to the head of marketing and you say, what's the most critical app? They say marketing. And if you go to sales and say, what's the most critical app? What are they going to say? Sales, right? So the only people that truly can prioritize across the entire business are the executives. So we then have to have our prioritized list of critical business processes and assets. So we have our risk posture, we have our risk management and escalation policy, and we have our prioritized list of assets. That is what I call the core. If you don't have that, you're going to struggle. If you don't have that, you're going to misuse resources. If you don't have that, you're going to have a hard time securing and protecting an organization. Those are the core areas. Then, the next thing on your checklist is remove and get rid of unacceptable risks. Have your lists of non-negotiables. For example, when I run a business, when I'm a CISO or a vCISO or help out in those areas, it's simple. Any system that's directly connected to the internet. So any system that has visibility to the internet, whether it's a web server, whether it's content, whatever it is, but if it's a system that people can directly connect to from the internet, it must be fully patched and it cannot contain critical data. Non-negotiable. Non-negotiable. There's never a situation where we allow that to happen. Why? Too big a risk. Too big a risk, too big an exposure, and it's not necessary. There's no reason why publicly facing systems cannot be patched, and there's absolutely no reason why publicly facing systems should not have critical data. So create your list of non-negotiables. Other non-negotiables could be all endpoint systems must have behavioral-based analytics on it. Now, you control the baseline, you control the image, so some of those are a little more easy, but once again, a more sensitive one. You might decide, based on the risk and all the work you did, that one of your non-negotiables are simple. No BYOD. No personal devices. If somebody is going to use their personal device for work, we would rather buy it, control it, manage it, and only use it for work-related activity. That additional cost is worth the benefit of using personal devices with personal information on it and personal leakage and personal exposure. Once again, I'm not saying these last couple, these are examples of non-negotiables. You need to create your own. So these are just examples of what you need to do. You then have to have your list of non-negotiables. And then the last thing you need to do on your CISO checklist is know where your critical data is. Yes, we put together a list prioritized, but do you really know where your critical data is located? With most of our clients, here's what happens. I go, what is your critical data and where is it located? And they go, oh, This is our critical data, and it's located on 3 servers. Great. Guess what? It is located on 3 servers, but it's also located on 2 others that they're not aware of. So now it's located on 5 servers, but they only think it's on 3. So they're going to put all their energy and effort on focusing on 3 and ignore the 2. So the other key thing is data discovery. You need to know where your critical data is and where it's located so you can properly protect, control, and secure it. So there's always more that can be done, and you can add to that, but that's sort of my core CISO checklist. Got to have a risk posture, risk management with escalation, prioritize list of critical assets, got to have your list of non-negotiables that you socialize, and then you have to know, control, and manage your data. You do those 5 things, and you're going to have a solid position, a solid foundation to build the rest of your cybersecurity program from. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Life of a CISO. Please make sure you follow me on social, Dr. DRERICCOLE on Instagram and other accounts. And if I can help you take your career to that next level, you want to go quicker and faster than the free resources, I also have some coaching programs I'd love to get you involved in. So reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, we'll catch you next week on Life of a CISO.